Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining the Behind Company Line podcast today. We have Kelly Nyland, CEO of Whym. Whym helps brands find their future customers. Kelly, I'm so excited to chat with you, not only from your background and your experience and really impressive, really background in go-to-market strategies and getting people to really be attracted or hold some kind of attachment to brands and products and things like that. So obviously it's going to be a fun conversation diving into not only what you've been able to do, but what you're working on at Whym and how you're kind of really transforming, I think, a movement that a lot of people have been feeling, which is connecting with brands and finding a new wave to whether it's purchase something or kind of be connected to a different company. I feel like a lot of people are very conscious about the way they're spending and spending habits, and brands are even more so trying to connect their customers as the whole brand association, I think, is becoming extremely popularized and people are really thinking about and being conscious about the things that they purchase. But before we go into Whym and what you've been doing there, what were you doing before you started the company?
Thank you, Julian. Thank you for having me. So excited to share some of our insights, a little bit on the company. And as far as my background is concerned, so I spent the last 15 years working on the brand side, owning go-to-market strategy for digital channels. So all direct-to-consumer channels, e-commerce, and working with a lot of .com retailers. At the same time, I also owned full omni-channel mix, which means that I worked with the retail buyers for 20,000 points of sale and did that not only in North American market, but I ran around the world for a long time, setting up businesses in the top 40 markets in the world. And so the way that I like to say this is that I sat in my now decision maker's seat. So Whym has created a piece of software that it helps to equip brands with their consumer or shopping intent data. And in my previous role, my shopper insights, my customer data, those were the lifeblood of helping me understand where my opportunities for growth and healthy gross margins within my business actually were. So that's a little bit of my background. And at the end of that sort of 15 years, found myself in a really interesting go-to-market role at Snapchat. We can talk a little bit more about that, because that's sort of where the inspiration for Whym came in. But I started my journey at Snapchat under the guise of helping to build out the future of shopping for what Snapchat and Evan believed would eventually kind of be the future. And so that's where I got some really interesting experience and some insight into how platforms like Facebook and TikTok and Snapchat approached the kind of commerce journey for next-gen consumers.
Yeah. It's so fascinating thinking about, you mentioned understanding your customer data to be able to kind of make decisions. And I'm wondering, based on, you launched quite a few different markets, and over those kind of markets, did you see a lot of differences in consumer habits and buying habits or anything that was similar between those markets? I'm curious in terms of how the challenge of understanding that particular space, those behaviors, and then actually launching something that's going to be used and valued. And of course, it's hypercritical to understand your market when you're launching because of that adoption period that you want to have as quickly as possible. What were some of the challenges you saw, and how different was launching in these auxiliary markets?
Yeah, so that's a good question. What we see is that shopper behaviors are actually quite consistent, regardless of the category. So I can talk a little bit about that. Typically, it's a little less about the category. So let's say like consumer packaged goods or fashion or beauty products. Consumers act pretty consistently across categories. What might change in their behaviors is the time it actually takes to consider the product. And sometimes that has to do with price points. Of course, the higher the price point, the longer the consideration cycle can be. So those are pretty consistent. But on the brand side, in terms of how they collect and leverage data, that can actually be very different from industry to industry. And so I can talk about like the differences and the similarities. So on the shoppers, Whym has a really unique product because we've focused on what we call overlooked behaviors in the shopper and consumer market. So a quick example of this is as shoppers are shopping today, they have their own ways of remembering products and saving products for later that they're not ready to make an impulse buy or an immediate purchase on, which is usually something around like a commodity, right? If it's not a commodity, there's this whole other massive bucket of products and brands that we discover every day. So Julian, I have a question for you. I know you were the most, so maybe not a lot of people ask you questions, but when you find yourself discovering new product, either through swipe up, scrolling, searching, hearing about a product from a friend, how do you find yourself remembering products that you're interested in, but not quite ready to buy yet?
Oh, it really depends. I go from adding to a specific cart. If I know that cart will be saved, I go to wish lists and kind of collect my likes. Or if I'm selecting something with my partner, then it's like a text thread of just different link of trying to figure out. Or on her desktop, it's a bunch of tabs that drives me crazy because I cannot switch tasks that quickly. Unlike her, she's amazing at switching tasks quickly, but it really depends on the functionality of the platform or product, in my opinion.
Yes. So very good. You are in the majority. So here's what's fascinating, and we could talk about what happens on desktop versus mobile because there's some things that change as we shop there. So what we see is that the number one behavior in consumer shopping is screenshotting. So if you're on your phone and you swipe up and kind of in this flow of like wanting to get through your content, you're being entertained, of course. And so a lot of consumers will just take a screenshot or they'll exit themselves into a native browser and they'll leave a bunch of tabs open. So of course on desktop, multi-tab shopping is one of the most common behaviors. Same thing on mobile. So I just kind of keep 80 mobile tabs open like a digital junk drawer. And I just kind of know I can go back to it at any time. And then we hear a lot of stories like, hopefully my phone doesn't crash, right? And just all over again. And then the third thing is some combination of text, emailing, or DMing a friend, a partner, or yourself to keep a list of links somewhere. We actually hear a lot of people have like an Apple Note full of product links or one email with like a quirky subject line, and they keep all their stuff in there. And then the fourth thing is, and we keep track of the top 10 behaviors here, but the fourth one is like, I don't do anything. I just wait. I tell the story or I wait for someone to retarget me. And so here's what's really interesting about that is the majority of those behaviors, Julian, are not actually traceable or trackable by brands today. And brands actually know this and they're quite frustrated about it because these are signals, really important signals of high interest and high intent. And what brands are facing today is this complete erosion of traditional advertising. We saw this initially with very sort of older forms of advertising like TV or magazines or print. That kind of fell out. But now, since Apple actually made this privacy update less than 2 years ago, this has created this massive erosion of the efficiency and the effectiveness of like Facebook and Google. And so there's like this low level panic in the growth marketers and e-commerce directors world today, where they have to actually make those product detail pages, those pages that, right, for each product, they have to make those pages work harder because they are getting all of this discovery traffic. And once consumers land on that page, they have to collect more data early and often there because it's really expensive to actually get a shopper to that product page. And it's becoming more and more and more expensive. And that's forcing a lot of experimentation by brands.
Sure.
And you kind of asked about the differences, right? Like, what are the differences in how different industries are trying to tackle this problem of my advertising just doesn't work anymore. I used to be able to stick $1 in the Facebook machine and $2 would come out. And that's just not the case anymore.
Yeah.
So, for example, some of our CPG brands have said we've exclusively stopped advertising on Facebook and we've just gone to Instacart to do native advertising so that we can have our products show up in the cart. Right. And like, oh, don't forget to buy this. Don't forget to buy this.
Right.
Promote their products to be seen by consumers. So it's a much more natural and what we call native way of advertising to the consumer. But so CPG will have to do that. Beauty and fashion brands may have other tactics where they're working with influencers to do like styling campaigns, beauty routines. So you start sort of seeing that these other ways of getting new consumers to discover you and swipe up are those things are changing, and they're depending on the industry. That's how they're changing, but everyone is facing the same problem. And advertising erosion, the necessity to experiment, and this necessity around these product pages becoming this center point of value creation for the consumer, like making sure that they can get all of their questions answered and validated on that. Almost like the product page is the best salesperson, right? So those are some of the changes, the dynamics that we're seeing in the industry, things that are similar, things that are different.
Wow. Well, then it's super interesting thinking about the product page and that you mentioned a second ago. And when you say that it has to work harder, or is it more in-depth descriptions? Is it better tracking on that landing page to be able to report back to a certain system? What kind of work is being done on those product pages that we don't see? And how quickly, I'm assuming it's like within a microsecond that you have to collect that information. What type of information are they collecting in terms of understanding the consumer behavior? Is it just how many people are landing on this page, or where is this person coming from? All this other information. So what kind of work is being done that we don't see, but also how quickly do they have to take that information, and what is it telling those brands?
Great question. This is like my favorite subject to talk about. So you just jump in with your next question when you're ready. So what's happening behind the scenes is that for the majority of the time, direct consumer channels like your e-commerce channel has been very successful at converting customers. And if you don't know much about margin structure, like when you convert a customer to a sale in your e-commerce channel, brands not talking about what it costs them to make the product, but let's just say they make 95% of the sale. When they go over and work with an Amazon, they actually start to only make 75% of the sale. When they go over and work with a company like a Target or a Nordstrom, they make 50% of the sale. So these e-commerce channels are really important for shoppers to buy directly from because it allows the brand to be more profitable with their sales. But now that consumers have a million different places that they can buy the products, the product detail page has to work even harder. And what that means is that there are now starting to be the wave of e-commerce enablement company pieces of software like Whym that are starting to tap into these different ways of helping consumers get that validation and in both cases create some FOMO or create value. And so I'll give you a couple of examples. So number one, Whym is actually a tool where when you visit the brands that we work with, we allow you to text yourself directly from the product page. So it's a little button that lives right underneath the add to cart button. And as you've mentioned before, this is already a like a very natural behavior that consumers do. So all you have to do is click a button, put your phone number in, and now you know now you have a product link back to that brand. And what the brand loves about this is they're like, oh my gosh, now we actually know who Julian is and what he wants to buy. And the good thing about this is that maybe you wanted to engage with this brand anyway, But if you would have just put your phone number in for a coupon, guess what's going to happen to you? You're going to just get stale messages for everything on the website. Because what's happened is the brand doesn't actually know what you want. So you have no way of knowing, oh, Julian fell in love with this product when he saw the swipe of ad or heard about it from a friend. And what we're working with our brand now is like, stop talking to them. Stop talking to your shoppers about everything on your website. Just remind them about the thing they fell in love with, right?
Yeah.
And help them, incentivize them to buy that product. All their concerns around the ease of return, the shipping costs, make sure you're bringing customer reviews or let's say real life examples of people wearing or using the product into your product pages. And so these are all sources of validation that consumers really need. And so there's apps like Whym. We do more than that. That's just one example. And then the second thing is like we started to see application that let people know about low stock alerts, right? Or there's only 5 of them red sort of left. And so there's all these different applications that can be added into the product page to help consumers get the information that they actually need. One last thing I'll just mention, which is kind of cool, is with the rise of like Chat GPT and Copy AI and dynamic text, we're starting to see that if brands can get an idea of who you are and what you're interested in, the site can actually completely change depending on where you come in from and what you see. And so these are the very first steps that we're trying to make with personalizing shopping experiences for the end consumer, because you may see a completely different site than your partner, depending on what data can be collected and exchanged and then kind of curated. So it kind of leads us in this direction of, have you ever seen Minority Report?
Yes, I have.
Where Tom Cruise is like walking down the mall.
Yep.
And he's actually seen only things that apply to him as a consumer. And we really need this, even though it might be a little scary, because there's just way too much to discover now. Everything is moved online. And data is the best way that we can actually start to curate experiences. So that's where we're headed.
Yes. It's so fascinating thinking about, you mentioned the cost breakdown, depending on the partner you work with, if it's like a Target or an Amazon or even just direct to consumer. I'm always curious about brands versus designers, because I've seen in a lot of, say, Targets recently, they have new designers and do these incredible launches, and it's very, very like, it's really good quality and really unique stuff. And then you see less or so of the fast fashion brands actually becoming even less and less unique quality, kind of decreasing, but they're still kind of pumping out fat things, cheap things that you can purchase. How does that change the dynamic if now designers and even brands more so can see what's being attractive to their consumers, what's being more popularized, what's getting maybe not bought, but saved a lot of times? How does that change the dynamic in not only what brands produce, but also the designers on who are creating these products? What does that change in the dynamic, or has that changed at all in terms of how it influences what they make, how they make, and how they understand what's being popularly accepted by customers?
Yeah, so I think some of the data can be used in a couple different ways. Number one is the type of data that Whym works with is what we call intent data. So it's helping to identify the shoppers that have discovered your products, haven't purchased yet, and are willing to share with you what they actually are interested in buying. And that actually helps brands forecast the number of units that they need to produce. And it can help with short run streetwear, promo brands, consumer packaged goods. It can help a lot of different types of industries in terms of forecasting. And also give signals on maybe different price points that potentially are not just like impulse buys.
Yeah.
So yeah, so some of our brands actually use this data in their forecasting, especially with new product releases. Like, okay, it may take our shoppers some time to learn about this product or to warm up to this if it's a new product. How can we get a signal of at least high interest? As far as like fast fashion and then very like high quality designers, a lot of that has to do with price point. A lot of this has to do with, I think a lot of consumers consider fashion as like an art form, right? And their body is the canvas. So they want to kind of paint themselves differently all the time. And one thing about the product detail page that I think is really important is communicating the values, whether it's clean beauty, right? Or there's a lot of different like sustainability badges, certifications. And so if your product is at a higher price point, the product detail page, again, is a great place to validate with the right consumer. Okay, our price point might be $10 higher. Or even being transparent in your pricing model. Like we've seen some examples of that as well, where brand will just be completely transparent. I actually think that Everlane might have piloted this a few years ago, where they were transparent, right? In their model, kind of along those lines of what I was just describing, like, here's how much it costs us to create this product. We could create it this way for in a lot less sustainable way, or we could sell it over here at this retailer, but we would have to give up X percentage. And that's actually like money that we could be giving you off for like free shipping or that 10% off coupon that you're looking for to make the sale. And so, yeah, so margin structure and using these values to help consumers understand why they're paying more for one product versus another is a great way to do that. And again, embedding this directly into product pages and making it obvious for consumers is a great way to differentiate yourself. If you're fast fashion, or if you're sustainable, or if you have these different ways of communicating, of course, what we're seeing is shoppers shop by their values. And that's often a really confusing landscape too, because sometimes badges just end up being more marketing.
Right.
And so consumers have to do a lot of research to kind of figure out, what does this really mean? And do these certifications or badges or what this brand's telling me, is that true? And can I really trust, like, is using these things to do what we call either for social proof or trust builders versus trust busters. So that's how you can think about fast fashion versus designers versus how are the costs of these different things associated with the processes that manufacturers decide to go through.
Yeah. I mean, you hit so many points and so many trigger points. Honestly, I'm a huge consumer. I especially with fashion, I love not only going through brands, but going to stores and identifying I love the discovery process as much as I love the purchasing and presenting myself. And I'm sure most kind of can agree with that. But it's interesting that a lot of the differentiators for purchasing, at least in my experience, and I'm sure most, is with the things you mentioned, not only the quality of the description, but how many pictures are involved in with somebody actually wearing the product. How do I know about the model and their sizing so I can make sure that when I purchase something, it doesn't go to waste and we're not just throwing it away, or I'm not just giving it to Goodwill or all these secondary hand clothing where it kind of floods the market with things that people, I feel like a lot of times, at least historically, people would buy something that would last years and you hand it down and because the quality of the material and the uniqueness in that time period, and seeing that in an e-commerce platform is challenging because you don't really get that experience unless you're flooded with the right information. And so fascinating to hear you. I mean, you're hearing, I'm like triggered in so many different ways. I'm thinking about the different websites that I'm like, I don't like that thing, and changing from product to product. But going back to Whym and thinking about the traction you've seen so far, not only what's been some success and how many customers and brands have you been able to connect consumers with, but what's particularly exciting about the next stage of growth that you're seeing in the years to come?
Yeah. So today, Whym had traditionally worked with direct-to-consumer brands in CPG, lifestyle, in beauty. And we've initially, like our very first cohort has been about 500 of these different brands. Now, what we're doing is a lot of this shopping has shifted the power has shifted more to marketplaces and the retailers. I think that there are reasons. I think there are reasons for this where consumers may not get the shipping costs or the ease of return that they're looking for from brand by brand to brand to brand. So there's kind of there's a scalability opportunity that these types of partners for Whym have. So we are starting to work with much, much larger brands that have both direct to consumer business or e-commerce, right? Like a .com, but then also have stores. So we use the omni-channel, what we call omni-channel, which just means physical and digital. That's coming back. And consumers are wanting to go into the store, understand the quality of the product, try it on for all the reasons that you just mentioned. Like, okay, what is this model like sizing? And then a lot of brands have had to also show and have done a good job of showing, I should say, that like this fits on a variety of different models and body types, right, for inclusivity. So I think one of the reasons that we're seeing that experience in store become really important is because of these different areas of validation that consumers are looking for. And so there's just the store experience, and the idea of showrooming can really help with that. So Whym is starting to work with these type of partners. That's where our growth opportunity is. We're also starting to work with different technology partners in data and messaging and within e-commerce enablement, all kind of focused on those things I mentioned before, like how can we create more personalized shopping experiences on those product detail pages? How can we get data faster into the place where insights can be extracted, and then that can be turned back around for the end users. So yeah, our biggest opportunities are in those larger brands, retail marketplaces where consumers are going in store shop and wanting to remember products that they find there, and then the different type of partnerships as well.
Yeah. It's so exciting. And thinking about one thing that just popped in my head about your product, you mentioned it kind of within a browser. If I'm say looking at a certain particular website, it kind of sits there so they can reference, and I can use it to reference that product in the future. What does that mean in terms of expansion opportunity? Does it plug in with other brands that say you are quote unquote not necessarily partners with, but then you see a lot of interest and you can kind of use that data as like an entry point to connecting with that brand? Have you been able to do that? That seems like a really cool kind of funnel for new business opportunities. Is that part of the business model?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Very, very smart, Julie. So today Whym's key customer is a brand. So our customer is a brand, and we help brands identify their customers, right? Their shoppers. And the way that we do that is through a suite of different tools that really align with those shopper behaviors we talked about earlier when I asked you the question, like, how do you remember, right? Yeah. We build technology to detect all of those signals in a way that brands can't get otherwise today. But here's what's interesting. When shoppers meet us through a brand, we offer them the opportunity to extend that experience. So let's say you've texted yourself from a product page, or we also have an experience where we'll give you an entire visual browsing history of everything you've seen on that brand site for the last year. And that way you can kind of go back and shop. You can multi-tab shop. You can compare. You can favorite. Kind of like a supercharged wish list, right? Which I mentioned before. So we actually offer shoppers the opportunity to extend that experience. So let's say you meet Whym on one of your favorite fashion brands today, but you say, oh, that was really interesting. I want to have that experience again. And kind of when you use Whym like a shopping inbox, you can go download our Chrome extension, and you can download our app from the Apple App Store. And this allows you to kind of bring into one experience the things you love the most from like Instacart, Amazon's Save for Later button. And what we call this is a shopping inbox. So it allows you to bring everything you want to remember from your Instagram feed to your search, everything in one place. And then from there, you can kind of create collections. So if you've ever shared an Amazon wish list with somebody, you know that what bars you out is like everything from Amazon. And so we allow you to actually create collections out of anything on the internet. So same idea, but you can pull in the URL and the products from anywhere and give someone like a visual wish list, your favorite brands that align with your values. And then you can actually bag up lots of different brands and also buy in one place. So the future vision of the shopper experience is essentially to create almost like this Instacart for shopping, meaning for other categories. Yeah.
And what does that do in terms of like the future of brand collaboration? Say like, hey,
Yeah.
I have this customer, they have similar shopping habits as your customer as well. We maybe are competing or non-competing, but we have a huge opportunity in terms of the population. Let's make something together. One of my favorite collaborations is like the Coach and Disney collaborations. Every time that they put something together, whether it's a cool wallet or purse or article of clothing, it's so impressive the way that they're able to work together. And then you pass something so unique, but then we feel like, I don't know if I'm going to get any hate from this for like Fendati, and then I want to throw up. What does that do in terms of the collaboration effort between brands, and how much more will we be seeing in the future?
So I think that's really important with this side of our data is that we can actually now see if the shopper discovers, let's say, a white on white sneaker from one of our partnered brands.
Yeah.
But then they kind of go out and they start shopping for that. So we'll keep track for our shoppers of all the tabs that they have open so that they never lose their browsing history ever again. And then they can delete it or favorite it, whatever they want to do.
Yeah.
And so what we can see is like, okay, Julian went over here and he actually shopped on these 4 additional sites to look for the best style and the best price of that product.
Yeah.
And so that data can help us power better experiences, but also collaborate with other brands because we're reaching out to those brands and saying, hey, your shoppers are already using this inbox to save products they love and compare. We kind of say our shopper experiences does 4 things: collect, compare, buy, and share. That's what consumers want to do. And so, yes, it's opening up much more awesome brand opportunities. And then for the shoppers, we want to create a transparency layer for what not only we are learning, but brands are learning about your data. One of the things that bothers me the most and continues to kind of drive my passion for building this business is that when I go into my ad targeting interest for like Facebook inside of Instagram. So in Instagram, you can actually go look at all of the categories of products that Instagram believes you're interested in based on content that you've engaged with.
Right.
And I do this at least once a quarter is kind of filter through that. Unfortunately, 65% of those interests are wrong consistently.
Really?
So for example, like I have a friend who mods like custom motorcycles, and I'm now in this ad interest targeting stage. There are like tons of custom and I have no hate against motorcycles. But here's what is terrible because I've also run advertising. Those motorcycle companies or parts or whoever in that, from small brands to big brands, they're paying Facebook for incorrect ad interest data to target me. So that's why this like ad efficiency is so helpful. And the way that I believe that we correct this is by being really transparent and building trust with consumers to show them, not bury this in 5 different setting trees. It's like bring this data up front and say, hey, Julian, this is actually matched with how you shop today, right? And you can't rely on old data. Like we change so often as consumers, our looks change from season to season.
Yeah.
It has to be like a real-time, dynamic, transparent collection, trading, and sharing of data. And when you talk about data, it's like super nerdy, right? Like, okay, like what does my data look like? All I can think about is like lines of code or tables, spreadsheets, or charts.
SQL.
I think there's a way to show data in a very visual way. It's actually exciting to see, to learn about yourself and your own behaviors, and then to make adjustments, right? It does fit me almost like a dating profile. So I've left that does not work for me in this. I do not like motorcycle parts. So that is for me. That is how I'm feeling right now. That is kind of a style that I like. And so our future vision is to really help bring that transparency in, because brands have an incredible amount of data on you. It's very difficult for you as the consumer to extract that. And brands are not getting the value out of that data because it could be wrong. It could be old, and it could be like, it was really sort of, you were shopping for your son, or you're shopping for your partner, or your dad, right?
Right.
And they don't differentiate those different sort of shopping personas that you have. And so let's make this better. And I think consumers have to really participate in that, to have better experiences themselves, and for brands to actually be able to do a much better job with showing you the collabs that you get really excited about, and not the ones that make you angry.
That was just a personal pet peeve, but obviously, I think a lot of people have that experience with like they see and what they're almost. It's like we're no longer in that experience of you're telling me what I should be interested in, but more so I know what I'm interested in, and I'm going to discover. It seems like that paradigm is completely shifted. Yeah.
And I think a lot of times, the way that these older advertising platforms believe is that they actually believe that they know you better than you knew yourself.
No,
That was the premise that they were operating under. And that is not where we are in the world. And so we haven't conceded that the ability for data to learn about us. And now we actually have to have these systems come up to speed with really serving us as consumers. And that's what technology is all about. Like, technology is just a tool for that. And it's about assembling the digital Legos. Now, all of this is possible. It just takes some to have the view of this and to build the product and technology around this. There are a lot of companies thinking this way, about data, and really trying to move these experiences forward.
Yeah. What are some of the biggest challenges or risks that Whym faces today?
Yeah. So like any startup, we face very traditional risks, right? Will we get the traction that we need for our next fundraising round? Will we fundraise? In how successful will we be at fundraising in the current market environment, where everyone's just scared, holding on to their money? And I wouldn't say scared, but I would say can afford to wait. That's just can afford to wait. Whereas founders cannot. They cannot afford to wait on bringing capital into the company and for growth, right? So those are just traditional risks that any startup faces. Specific challenges that Whym faces is, as a software company, right now, brand, it's very difficult for them to assess the number of pieces of software that they could use for their business. And that's a real problem, because there are probably 1,000 great software companies, great products. And for the brand to figure out how to parse through all of that noise to find the right companies for them and the right app stack for them, it just takes a lot of work. And so for any software company today, what we call the top of the funnel, right? The demand, the sort of discovery and the demand, that's a challenge that I think a lot of software companies are facing, especially younger or newer ones. Of course, everyone knows who Salesforce or HubSpot, these massive companies are. But if you're not one of those companies, how do you really help to communicate the value of what you have to offer to the right mixture of not only brands, but decision makers of those brands? And that's a big challenge. I would say the other challenge that our types of software companies face is working with bigger, or I would say this is a small and a big problem, but with companies that have a lot of data, it's how can we move the data faster through its collection, insight, and then activation stages. What that really means is that companies are sitting on a mountain of data, but it doesn't really matter much until a data scientist gets together with a business owner, someone who understands the business or the customer, and they have to work really hard together to actually extract from this mountain of data something that's actually interesting and actionable. Then once they have those insights, they have to figure out how to get that information back out, maybe on their pages, right, to the consumer, so that the consumer can get that value. Or some ways that we say it, like for our product pages, once we collect the phone number and the product that you're interested in, that information's got to get back into marketing and messaging systems so that Julian doesn't get blasted with for sale. Then it's reminded about the product he fell in love with and how it's sustainable and how it's going to fit him great. And, oh, don't worry, it's easy to return, or there's no shipping cost. Like, it's that personalized journey that is incredibly difficult to automate today. And so that's a huge challenge. And we're working really hard to try to put those templates together in a way that are automated for brands and help them do that faster. And so, those are the things that we're facing as challenges.
Yeah. Oh, you can definitely get me. I'm one, I have a philosophy. If I don't want to buy it right away, if I keep thinking about it, then the next day I'll come back and purchase it. So, I mean, you have me in the perfect position.
You're patient.
Oh, I'm a big consumer, so I've got to create rules around it. Yeah. We're going to say, thinking about just if everything goes well, what's the long-term vision for Whym?
Yes. So we talked a little bit about that. Whym is in this unique position that a lot of companies aren't in today. And we've not only built for the brand side of the business, but we've also built for the consumer side of the business. And so most companies only build for one side or the other, right? Yeah. So, so I think that's, or let's say they'll build up an audience and then they'll just monetize it through advertising. So the most common business models are what we call business to consumer. And that would be a company like a Snapchat, right? Just a consumer focused company. And then the way they make money is by selling that audience through advertising to brands. So, and then on the other side, you have just strictly B2B software. And those are big companies, like I mentioned before, like Salesforce or HubSpot. And they just focus on selling from their business to other businesses. Whym actually has the whole. So we sell to consumers and we serve consumers today. We don't sell anything to them yet as a service. And then we serve our brands. So the reason that this is a part of our future vision is because we want to create this trust conduit between brand and consumers for the same reasons that I mentioned to you before. Today, all of your data is really wrapped up in brands somewhere, right? Every brand you've ever interacted with has a table of data, and it has Julian Torres, and it has your order history, and it has your shipping and your payment, and the other piece of information that you've given them during your journey. And some of them are incomplete and some of them are complete, depending on whether you've purchased or not. And then they may have other attributes that they've assigned to you. And what's kind of where I think we're headed is you need to have a mechanism by which you can kind of have the ability to ingest that information into one place, look at it all, right, in a very friendly way, and then help give back signals to say this is actually true, right? I'm not interested in motorcycle parts or that other brand collaboration. I'm really just interested in Disney and this. And so that's our future vision. Our future vision is to create value on both sides of this exchange by being this trust conduit and this trust layer. And we think we can do it better than anybody because we have a real empathy for the brands that we're working with and the struggles that they're facing with ad erosion. And just these shifting market dynamics, having to be really scrappy with the dollars that they're spending. And on the consumer side, look, let's be honest, like our screenshot folder in our Canva role is not really the best. for a second memory bank.
Right.
I mean, it's fine for today. Like, we're not going to die. But, there's all these different behaviors that we develop because we're not really sure we trust brands with all that information. Because what we've kind of been told is that if I ever brand my information, all they're going to do is just like hit me over the head with emails, SMS until I unsubscribe. I mean, like, let's be honest. And it's going to take sophistication and a lot of work to actually get us to a place where we can have better data on the brand side and more personalized experiences on the shopper side. So it's a 10-year vision for sure. We'll get there. And Whym is going to be, I think, one of key cohort of companies that are going to be able to do that and do that really, really well.
Yeah. I would like to ask the next question, just because I love how founders extract the knowledge that they ingest, and whether it was early in your career or now, what books or people have been highly influential in your life?
Did you say books?
Book or people, yeah.
Books or people. Okay. I thought that's what you said. I wanted to make sure. So books or people. So from the founder side with fundraising, I always recommend anything by Brad Sell. Brad Sell in one of the partners and kind of, I would say, the most well-known leader from a venture capitalist group called the Foundry Group. And that group was also they started Techstars, which a lot of founders know about. And not only do I advocate for Brad's writing, which is extremely easy to digest and very easy to understand, I would say complex concepts when you start as a founder. You don't really know anything about cap table dynamics or fundraising or really what you're doing. Being a founder is all about figuring out how to do some 10 things a day that you didn't know how to do before, right?
Yeah.
Learning how to learn every day. And so Brian makes it super easy to understand. He's also just an amazing human. I sat in a boardroom with him for 4 years and watched him mentor the CEOs that I was working for at the startup at the time as a part of their executive team. So I highly advocate for reading anything by him. With 2 books, Inspired and Empowered, right, by Marty Kagan. And if you're building products, I would highly recommend these two books. I think they do a really fantastic job of setting your expectations that when you put a product in the market, it's not going to be perfect at the beginning. You have to actually work really hard to make it amazing. And you have to know when something isn't working and to move on, right? And then the second book in that series essentially says, you have to figure out how to empower your teams, right? Like, it's not just about a founder having a vision of a product that has to get imparted and then eventually owned. Those are my 2 sort of. Brad's like an oldie but a goodie. I recommend that all the time. And then the Marty Kagan stuff is something more recently that I really enjoy.
Amazing. And I know we're over time here, so I definitely want to be conscious of that. But I've been having such a great conversation about not only consumer behaviors, but how you're building. And I want to make sure we didn't leave anything on the table. So last question before you share where we can find you and support you and Whym. Is there anything I didn't ask you that I should have or that you would have liked to answer?
I want to just share one other sort of goodness piece, which is I've done a fundraising series it's very tactical to help other founders figure out how to set up their fundraising process. I talk to a lot of founders. I try to do as many more intros to investors as I possibly can. And so I just like to offer that as an additional resource to this community. If you're starting your fundraising journey, or even if you have a robust fundraising journey and are just looking for some updated best practices and tactics, I think the series will really add some value, regardless of sort of which bucket you are in your experience around fundraising. So that's, I would say, the only other thing that I've worked on recently that I think could really add value here. So yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that. Yeah, please do. And we'll share it in the notes and get everybody involved in that. And last little bit is where we can find you and Whym. What are your websites, your LinkedIn, your Twitters? Give us all your plugs so we can support you as a founder, but also your company.
Absolutely. So it's pretty easy to find me. You can pretty much Google Kelly Nyland and then the platform that you're trying to find me on. So rather than sort of try to rattle off all the URLs, just do that. I'm easy to find. And LinkedIn is a great place to find me. Our website for Whym is Whym, WHYM wallet.com. You can go learn all about the brand side, the consumer side. You want to try the Chrome extension in the app if you're an end user. Even if you're on the brand side and you just want to experience like what your shoppers are going to experience, you can get a bunch of our partnered and featured sellers on our website, read our case studies and our brand stories. And yes, and then if you have any questions, happy to chat with you. You can reach out to us at hello@Whym, WHYM.tech.
Amazing. Kelly, it's been such a pleasure, like I said, not only learning about your experience, but also what Whym's doing. And I obviously, I think my biggest takeaway is how you're able to not only use data to help brands understand their consumers, but what that really means to the overall consumer experience and how more catered and unique that we're all going to kind of face in that experience. So I hope you enjoyed yourself today on Behind Company Lines, and thank you so much for joining the show.
Thank you for having me, Julian.
Of course.